is CBS 11 News Now.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Gilma Avalos, coming live to you from the Fort Worth newsroom, and we do want to take you to an update. Officials in South Florida are updating us on a school shooting that took at least 17 lives. Let's listen in.
This evening, our district is in a tremendous state of grief, sorrow. We're heartbroken over this unspeakable tragedy that has occurred here in Parkland, Florida. Words cannot express the sorrow that we feel. The victims and their families, our thoughts and prayers go out to them. No parent should ever have to send their kids to school and have them not return. That should not happen in Parkland. It shouldn't happen anywhere in this country. And we've got to find a way for this to stop. As a district, we will continue to work with law enforcement. We are focusing on providing all of the support that our students, our families, and employees need to cope with this devastating tragedy. It's going to take us some time to go through this, to heal, to figure out how to move on. Some updates on Marjory Stoneman Douglas. As for activities at school, will be closed for the remainder of this week. All activities will be canceled as well. We are going to provide grief counselors. They will be available to Marjory Stoneman Douglas students and families at the Pines Trails Park Recreation Center and Amphitheater, located at 10555 Trails End, Parkland, Florida, beginning at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. Again, that's grief counselors for parents and families at Pines Trails Park Recreation Center in Parkland. We will also have grief counselors available for staff members at the Parkland Library at 6620 North University Drive in Parkland. Again, for the staff members, we will have grief counselors available at the Parkland Library at 6620 North University.
So we just heard there from Robert Runcie. He's the superintendent of Broward County Schools, and he did tell us that the high school will be closed through the end of the week. He said that grief counselors, which will certainly be needed in this community, are going to be available and are going to be at hand. And just to recap, this happened at the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. This is in Parkland. It's about an hour north of Miami by car. And tonight, we're learning more about this investigation. We've heard from elected officials. Senator Bill Nelson of Florida said that he was briefed by the FBI about this case. He called it a premeditated murder. The shooter, he says, wore a gas mask and had smoke grenades. Nelson says that the attacker set off the fire alarm so that students would come pouring out of the classrooms into the hall, and then this carnage began. So we do want to take you to a tweet from Marco Rubio tonight, who tweeted, "Just finished update from Fed authorities on Florida school shooting. It is clear attack was designed and executed to maximize loss of life." And let's get back to the presser now, because authorities are taking questions and sharing more information with us right now. Designed and executed to maximize.
Stop. The governor, his office, the state, everyone has just been outstanding in terms of their support and their efforts, and it's been heartwarming to see that. So as a community, as a state, I'm sure we'll be able to recover from this. Governor Scott, thank you.
So as soon as you hear something like this is happening, the first thing you start thinking about the families. You know, you think about your own family. As a grandparent and a parent, the first thing you think about is, you know, God, I hope this never happens to my family. Then you think about, you're furious. How could this ever happen in this country? How could this happen in this state? This is a state that is focused on keeping all of our children safe. You come to the conclusion this is just absolutely pure evil. This state does not tolerate violence. We have law enforcement that will always show up to defend our safety. As soon as this happened, I started having updates from Sheriff Israel. I've talked to President Trump, the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristen Nielsen, Superintendent Runcie, the Commissioner of Law Enforcement, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, Rick Swearingen. And I know everybody has worked tirelessly to make sure we do everything to keep everybody safe and to have a thorough investigation. My prayers are with everybody impacted. I can't imagine what the families that are sitting there wondering if they've lost a family member. They don't know yet. Those that do know they've lost a family member, I just can't imagine how their lives have been changed. Like all of us, we'll be praying for each of those. Everybody in the hospital, I pray for their full recovery. All the individuals that unfortunately had to go through this experience, I know that there's going to be grief counselors, and I'm sure it's going to be very, very difficult as they think through what happened and replay in their mind what happened. I just can't imagine going through that. After this press conference, I'm going to be going to the hospital to do everything I can with those families. I'm going to continue to let local law enforcement, the school district, everybody involved know whatever state resources are necessary. We will provide whatever resources are needed to do everything we can, either whether it's the investigation or help any family member that's impacted. Again, this is just pure evil. But I will be staying here in Broward County to do everything I can to be helpful.
Basically, minutes after this event happened, I got a call from our Attorney General, Pam Bondi. Hours later, she's here. She, sadly, when I was speaking to her privately, she knows all too well about these tragedies. She was in Orlando in the aftermath of the Pulse nightclub, and she's come down here to help the families of those that lost loved ones. So I'm going to bring her up here to talk to you about some of the things that the Attorney General is going to do for our families.
Thank you, Sheriff. Sheriff, I cannot thank you, the governor, and the FBI, Rob, how you've handled this. You've been incredible. Superintendent, FDLE, all of the agencies working together. It's a horrible tragedy, and sadly, we've been through this before. I was also out in Nevada for the mass shooting. In fact, one of the victims called me on the way here from the Nevada shooting and said, I can't believe this is happening again. She still has PTSD, and she was a survivor. The office, my office functions in a way, and this is what we're going to be doing. I have 5 advocates headed in right now. I will have at least 10 more tomorrow, driving in from all over the state. We will pay for the funeral expenses of these poor victims and do everything we can to help their families. The state of Florida, we will pay for counseling for the surviving victims. We will pay for students who need counseling. We will have the forms. It's paperwork that just must, a page that must be filled out. We bring it to the victims' families so they can get it done right now. Don't have to worry about the expenses. We will take care of it. GoFundMe reached out to me already tonight. They've been pulling off anyone. If you think you're going to scam people during this tragedy, you're not. GoFundMe, they're monitoring every site that's popping up, and no money will be dispersed under GoFundMe until they know it's legitimate. So if you are donating to a crowdfunding site, GoFundMe is making sure that those funds will go to true victims and their families. We've also reached out to the funeral homes, the directors in Florida, who have been great partners through Pulse. We will not let funeral homes gouge us. The funeral home industry, they're sending down people tomorrow to help with the cost of the burial expenses for these victims. Sadly, we've all become a club that we never wanted to be a part of, partnering with the FBI, and now this is our 3rd time dealing with such a mass tragedy, but we will continue to work together as a team, as a family, and love and take care of all of these victims and their family members. That's why we're all here. Governor, thank you for everything you've done and always do for our state.
Yeah, one thing the Attorney General's office does is they bring in victim advocates, and her and her team, they will go through and help each family that has impacted. So if you want, the best way is to reach out to the Attorney General's office. And
we'll
you have
find
advocates.
our victims. That's right.
In conclusion, in this beautiful town of Parkland, where I've lived up until a year ago. I've lived here with my family and raised our kids here for 10 years. We lost a football coach from Stoneman Douglas High School tonight. My triplets graduated from this very school. We had, I won't be releasing the name, but we had a deputy sheriff whose son was shot tonight, shot in the arm. He's at one of the local area hospitals. I'm being told he's being treated with non-life-threatening injuries, thank God. If you are on a website and you know something, or you've seen something, you see a person with rifles and weaponry, and you see something that's not right, you owe it to your family, you owe it to your community, and you owe it to law enforcement to make this a safer nation by calling up someone tonight. Call up the FBI, call up the Broward Sheriff's Office, call up someone tonight and let them know that you have information or something's not right. You can prevent a major tragedy like this devastation that happened in Parkland tonight. Any questions?
Sheriff Phil Keating, Fox News. Can you provide more insight yet on the 17 fatalities, ages, how many were students, how many teachers, whether all of the parents have been in fact notified at this point, if in fact they do have a deceased son or daughter, and also motive?
No, I'll repeat what I said earlier. 12 of the victims have been identified. Their parents are in the process of being notified. We're looking to ID. Some of these children had no ID. They left their backpacks. There were no cell phones, so we could trace them back. So we're in the process of identifying these children and adults, so their families could be notified. So I can't elaborate any more than that.
Sheriff, have you identified all students, or is there anyone still missing?
We have only identified 12 of the 17 that have lost their lives.
Do you know of anyone missing, student body-wise?
Yeah, they're all located, just not identified.
Everybody's accounted for, but we're identifying the victims.
Because
we don't know the names of the victims.
The bodies are inside the
You've
school,
accounted for
no?
all the teachers in some way.
But the bodies of the 12 are inside the school yet.
Governor Scott, question for you. Today it's Parkland, it's Columbine, and everything in between. Are we all in society, politicians like you included, complicit when critics say we pay lip service to the great need for mental health care in this country, and when we're a nation of washing guns, when people like you are very pro-gun, don't want to see gun restrictions? When do you take a stand? Are you willing to take one now that it's happened in the backyard of your own state on mental health, Florida ranks poorly, and on gun control? What is your response?
My heart goes out to everybody impacted today. All of us can internalize this if it would happen to their family. All of us want to live and have everybody live in a safe community. And there's a time to continue to have these conversations about how through law enforcement, how through mental illness funding, that we make sure people are safe, and we'll continue to do that.
Governor.
Yes.
What business does a 19-year-old have? What business does a 19-year-old have in having an AR-15 specifically? Just your thoughts.
Yeah. We're finding all the facts. There's a thorough investigation going on. The Sheriff's Department will release exactly what happened, how the individual got a gun, things like that. We'll learn those things, and then we can make it. We can determine the future. How we continue to make this place safe.
What was your conversation with the president?
Do we have armed guards in the schools to prevent this type of tragedy? Do you agree that we should have armed guards in the school system?
Yeah, you want to answer it?
If a person, I've said this over and over and over again, if a person is predisposed to commit such a horrific event, like go into a school and shoot people, if a person is going to drive a truck into a crowded area, if a person is committed to committing great carnage, there's not anybody or not a lot law enforcement could do about it, or any entity could do about it. The only things we can do are train very hard. We have to train rigorously, and we do. We have to be able to mitigate. We have to be able to respond quickly so we can lessen the loss of lives. Certainly more money should go to mental health. I've said this time and time again. If we tear a knee up, we go to an orthopedic surgeon. If we have mental health issues, we need to be treated. But while people who are the victim of mental health illnesses in this country are being treated, in the opinion of this sheriff, they should not be able to buy, surround themselves, purchase, or carry a handgun. Those two things don't mix. So thank you for coming out here. I think we've answered all the appropriate questions, and tomorrow we'll update you again. And again, the most important thing is we need to pray tonight for these families. We need to pray for the victims. We need to pray for our communities, and we need to report anything we see that is different, that doesn't make sense, that's an aberration, that could help us prevent these mass tragedies. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Broward County Sheriff Scott Israel tonight asking for prayer. Certainly a difficult night for this community. They have certainly been through a lot. We're gleaning a little more information about some of these victims. In all, 17 victims. We heard from the sheriff that 12 of the victims have been identified. The rest, they're working to identify because some of these students, I'm assuming as they ran, trying to take cover, were surprised in this attack, didn't have cell phones or identification on them. I believe the sheriff mentioned that they have lost a football coach at the school. He also mentioned that the son of a deputy sheriff was shot in the arm, but that son is expected to be okay and at the hospital. So you can just see the extent of the impact of this community. I know that the South Florida community is in mourning right now, as is the rest of the nation. We see your comments coming in, prayers for these families. We know that Governor Rick Scott called this act an act of absolutely pure evil, and we're learning more about this suspect. This suspect has been identified as 19-year-old Nicholas Cruz. Cruz was taken to the hospital himself. Doctors there said he was treated, released into police custody. We saw him being released into police custody, and Cruz had been expelled for some unspecified disciplinary reasons. His former classmates, though, were not surprised that he was behind this tragedy. We've heard from fellow students and teachers throughout the day, some saying that he was not allowed to come into school with backpacks on. Let's take a listen at what some of the students had to say.
He got kicked out of school last year. A lot of people, he always had guns on him and stuff like that.
Okay, Broward County Sheriff Scott Israel says that the suspect also had at least one AR-15 rifle as well as multiple magazines. And he says most of the fatalities happened inside of the building, though some of the victims were found shot outside. This is a story that we're going to continue to follow. We're going to have much more at 10 o'clock. Any updates that we have, we will be sharing with you. Thank you so much for watching CBS 11, The Ones for Texas. For the latest updates, you can head to cbsdfw.com.